Hi, I'm Gareth Green, and in this video we're going to be thinking about some chord progressions that would follow on nicely from chord 2. It's often something that people ask me about. If I'm writing this chord, well, what would be the best chords to follow on from it? So chord progressions, as we call this. So I'm talking exclusively in this video about when you're going to use chord 2, and then, well, what would be a couple of chords that would follow on nicely from chord 2, regardless of musical style. And you might find that there are some things here that you think, yeah, that sounds very familiar. And there are one or two others that you think, oh, never thought of doing that before. So it might just extend possibilities. But before we get into it, just so we're entirely sure that everybody's happy about what I mean by chord 2 and by these other Roman numerals on the board, let me very quickly just go through an explanation of how this system works. And I'm going to work in the key of C major. And so in a scale of C major, we have C, D, E, F, G, A, B before we come back to C again. And when we're talking about chords, well, we can number off these notes, can't we? So that same scale again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then, of course, we're coming back to number 1 again. And to form our chords, we have a root, a third, and a fifth. So what do I mean by that? Well, the first note of the scale of C major is C, and so C is the root of chord 1. So if I start with C and then I count up to a third above it, 1, 2, 3, that gives me E. And then if I find a fifth above it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that gives me G. So C, E, G is chord 1. And we know we're talking about chords when we see Roman numerals. That's always the way we indicate chords. So C, E, G is chord 1. So therefore the same thing applies up the scale. So D, F, A is chord 2, the chord we're thinking about in this video. E, G, B is chord 3, F, A, C chord 4, G, B, D chord 5, A, C, E chord 6, B, D, F chord 7, and then C, E, G brings us back to where we started, chord 1. So we're starting with chord 2, D, F, A. And of course what I'm playing now is the basic triad, the 3 notes, but we can turn that into a 4-note chord or a 5-note chord or any other kind of size of chord simply by doubling up on those notes. So if I want to put that into 4 parts, well, I could just put another D on the bottom. Now I've got 4 notes, but I've got D twice, and then I've got F and A, but I could have any other kind of doublings that I wanted to. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into the progressions that might well flow on from chord 2. So the first one I've got on the board is 2, 1, 5. Now you'll find lots of textbooks will say, oh, be a bit careful about going from chord 2 to chord 1. Well, that's true, because sometimes you can end up with what we call parallel movement. So if I just go chord 2 followed by chord 1, I get these things called parallel or consecutive octaves. And I also get parallel or consecutive fifths. So 2 to 1 is something that some textbooks will advise you against. However, if you can get contrary motion between the bottom and the top of the chord, so as the bass goes down from D to C, the other notes go up, or certainly the top line goes up, then you can avoid all these parallels or consecutives. And that's certainly an issue with some of these progressions we'll be looking at. But if I go from 2 to 1, like this, do you see what I'm doing? I'm using the notes of 1 now, C, E, G, but I've got my right hand going in the opposite direction to the bass, so I haven't got any of those parallels. And then I can go on to 5. So you can hear 2, 1, 5. Actually works pretty well, doesn't it? Okay, well, what about the second version? This one is 2, 1, 4. So you've still got the 2, 1 issue, but as long as you use contrary motion going from 2 to 1, and then you can go to 4. So 2, 1, 4. Now you might think, does that sound convincing? Well, it might do. Or you might think it wants something to happen after it. Well, sure, that's fine. 2, 1, and then you could go 4, 5, 1, for example. And that would give you a really strong progression. So that 4, the third chord, might well lead you on to chord 5 and then chord 1. So that would give you a longer succession of this chord progression. Okay, the third option then is to go 2 to 1 and then to 6. So if I go 2 to 1 and 6, I get that. You can space out the notes in some other way if you want to. And again, you might think, well, am I convinced by that? One thing that is convincing is that you've got the note C in chord 1, and you've also got the note C in chord 6. And that happened on the previous one as well. You've got C in chord 1 and you've got C in chord 4. So that's what we call a common note, when you have a note in one chord that also comes in the chord after. And common notes are quite handy kind of binding notes from one chord to the next, especially if you can keep them in the same part or the same voice. So that's what I'm trying to do here by going A to C and then repeating the C at the top of this. So it kind of binds it together, having that repeated C. Now, if you're not entirely convinced by going from 1 to 6, well, again, think, well, where might I go next? So you might go 2 to 1 to 6, and then you might go 2 in first inversion zone, and then 5, 1. And suddenly, sounds quite good actually, doesn't it? So some of these chord progressions work very nicely on their own. Some of them are perfectly decent chord progressions, but maybe just want completing in some way. Okay, well, let's have a look at number 4. What am I talking about here? Going from 2 to 1 and then to 5, 7. And then I've put that little B in as well. So just to remind people who are not sure about these little letters A, B and C, A means root position, B means first inversion, and C means second inversion. So I'm talking about chord 5, 7 in first inversion. And what do I mean by that 7? Well, we know that chord 5 is G, B, D. So that's a root, a third and a fifth. If I add a 7th, that's F. So all I'm doing is I'm saying I'm using this chord, G, B, D, F, but the B, the first inversion, means that B is the note at the bottom of the chord. Okay, now why am I thinking about this? Well, if I go from 2 to 1 in option number 4, I go 2 to 1, and then I go to 5, 7, B. So can you hear the bass goes very nicely by step? D, C, B. So that's quite a nice progression. If you can get some neighbouring notes going in the bass line, that works very nicely. Now again, it's another 3 chord progression that doesn't want to stop on 5, 7B. If you're going 2 to 1 to 5, 7B, you might come back to 1 again. 1 and then 4, 5, 1. That would be a nice strong progression, wouldn't it? But you do notice plenty of progressions that go from 2 to 1 that work very nicely. So even if you've studied some of this and you've come across things in textbooks saying, oh, try not to go from 2 to 1, it's something you've got to be careful about in relation to these parallels or consecutives. But actually, if you organise a bit of contrimmation, they can be very effective options. Okay, option number 5, I'm now going from 2 to 3 to 4. Now this might raise a few more eyebrows because many textbooks say, well, avoid chord 7, it's always difficult, and try to avoid chord 3 because that's not very commonly used either. Well, there's an element of truth in that, but actually chord 3 can be a very effective chord. So how about this, going from 2 to 3 to 4? If you think about it, it's going to give me a nice steady bass movement, isn't it? Because if I go 2, 3, 4, the bass is going to go D, E, F in the key of C. What I don't want to do is to go D, E, F at another part of the chord, because then I get these parallels, these consecutive octaves. So again, think contrimotion. If I'm going to get the bass to go climbing up the steps there, can I get the other parts to maybe come down in the opposite direction. So if I do 2, 3, 4 like this, it's quite a nice progression. So do you see what I've done at the top? I've gone D, B, A. So that's moving in the opposite direction from the bass. And it's kind of quite a nice sort of slight modal flavour to it. And talking of modal flavours, option number 6 is kind of starting in the same way. It's going 2 to 3, but then it's going to 6. So 2 to 3 to 6. It's got an almost kind of Aeolian mode feel to it, but this is sitting in the context of C major because these are all 3 chords in C major. So I'm going minor chord, minor chord, minor chord, but I'm still in C major. So I think 2 to 3 to 6 is a very effective progression. Okay, well, what about option 7? So here we're going from 2 to 3 to 5. Well, some people might think 3 to 5 doesn't sound great, but see what you think. 2 to 3 and then to 5. Okay, slightly less usual thing, but one advantage is that you've got in this version of it, can you see that the note B comes in chord 3, as does the note G. So when you go on to chord 5, you've got the B and the G being able to repeat again as common notes. So this using of common notes is a binding impact. And when you've got 2 common notes, well, the 3 to 5 goes quite well, doesn't it? Option number 8 is going 2 to 3 to 1. 2 to 3 to 1. Okay, now some people are going to say, well, 3 to 1, what on earth is that? That's not a cadence. Well, you're right, it's not a cadence formula, but it doesn't have to be a cadence. This could be a progression that's happening at the start of a phrase, which is then progressing on to a cadence, or is midway through a phrase. So, you know, it's perfectly possible that we could go 2 to 3 to 1, always thinking about this contramotion where we need it. Slightly less usual one, but perfectly possible. Option 9, 2 to 4 to 5. 2, 4, 5, that's quite a strong progression, maybe more of a standard one. 2, 4, 5. And again, you can see I can get some nice stepwise movement into that top line, or it could be one of the middle parts. So, and again, going in contramotion with the bass. Option number 10, very similar, but 2 to 4, going on to 1 this time. So 2, 4, 1. And again, C is a common note between 4 and 1, so that works very well, doesn't it, to go to 4 to 1. Okay, and you've got common notes as well between 2 and 4 there, of course. Okay, option, where am I going next? Option 11 is 2 to 4 to 6. So 2 to 4 to 6. That's quite a nice one, isn't it? Unusual, but quite a nice progression. And again, you can use the common notes. Okay, well, what about 2 to 4 to 3? So 2 to 4 to 3. Again, it's not a cadence, but it's perfectly good progression inside a phrase, but slightly quirky, slightly different. 2 to 4 to 3. So I'm on a sort of little campaign to support chord 3. I'm not saying put chord 3 all over the place, but neither am I agreeing with those people who say, oh, just avoid chord 3. It's much easier if you don't go there, because you miss out on some quite interesting, colourful opportunities. Okay, your lucky number, number 13, 2, 5, 1. And this is a very standard one to do, probably the most common one, in fact, 2, 5, 1. Lots of cadences will do that. So you have a 5-1 cadence with 2 as an approach chord. 2, 5, 1. That 2 might be a 2B, or what some people would call a 2-6, a 2 in first inversion. So that's another strongly used possibility. Option 14 is going from 2 to 5 to 6. So that could work quite nicely as a cadence, or just as a progression within a phrase. Well, what about number 15, 2 to 5 to 3? Again, slightly less usual, but you've got common notes again, so why not use those? So 2 to 5 to 3. Option 16 is going from 2 to 6 to 5. So 2 to 6 to 5. Okay, again, you have to be a bit careful about your contribution. If you go 6, 5, you'll end up with these octaves and these fifths. But if you get contribution, that works quite well to go 2 to 6 to 5. Or option 17, where you go 2 to 6 to 4. Now, again, you wouldn't want to stop there. So you might well progress beyond this. So number 17 might go 2, 6, 4, and then you might go 5, 1. And that's a great progression. 2, 6, 4, 5, 1. Kind of pretty standard progression. Option number 18, finishing on 3. Well, what about this? 2 to 6 to 3. That's quite a nice one actually, isn't it? 2 to 6 to 3. And then what about this one? Option number 19, where we go 2 to 7b to 1. So the 7b, just to remind you, is chord 7 in first inversion. Now, when you have a diminished chord, and chord 7 is always diminished in a major key, it normally works better if you place it in first inversion. So you're much more likely to see 7b than you are to see 7a. And in this case, it's quite effective because the bass of chord 2 is D, but the bass of chord 7b is also D, and then moving on to 1. So do you see what I'm doing there? I've got chord 2, and then 7b, 1. So that works quite well. And another version is what I've got in option 20. So this is going 2 to 7b to 6. So there we are. This is not exhaustive, by the way, but there are 20 possibilities. Some of them might be considered more conventional than others. So it's good to know the conventional progressions, but it's also good just to get outside the box a little bit and think of the less conventional options, which are the ones that work. You can play around with every option there is, and you'll soon hear that there are some that maybe don't work so well. But I hope that at least kind of gives you some possibilities. If I decide to use chord 2, where am I going to go from there? Lots of people find they're a bit stuck with what we call the primary chords, chords 1, 4 and 5, and they're kind of dying to be a bit more inventive. And this is where these secondary chords come in, 2, 3, 6. But if you're going to use the secondary chords, well, where do you go from them? Well, here we are, 20 possibilities for how you could progress from chord 2. So I hope that's helpful. And if you've enjoyed this video and you want to know more about chords and harmony and so on, well, have a look at our website, www.mmcourses.co.uk, where you can find details of our many courses that are covering all this stuff and covering music theory, oral work, analysis work, all sorts of things that you might find very useful to empowering you as a musician. There's a keyboard harmony course out there, and there's a Bach chorale course, all sorts of things that cover these kind of progressions and take you much further. And while you're on the website, you might just click on Maestros on the homepage and discover what it means to be a Music Matters Maestro. Huge perks, including discounts off the courses we offer and an opportunity to join our fantastic monthly live streams and meet with other musicians from around the world, where we study together and share compositions, performance and so on. A very exciting group, lovely supportive people as well. So lots to offer there. Just have a look at www.mmcourses.co.uk to find out all about it.